Hello, my friend. Thank you for being here today. Before we begin, I have one small request. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe and give it a like. It really helps and tells me that you want more inspiring graded reader stories in English. Now, let's dive into today's topic: how to stay motivated every single day. This story is written specially for learners, in clear and easy English, but with enough depth to be meaningful. Over the next 10 parts, we will follow the life of a young designer named Liam, who begins his journey feeling tired, lost, and completely unmotivated. Through small steps, daily lessons, unexpected encounters, and important discoveries, he slowly learns how to bring motivation back into his life, and how to keep it. Today, in this first part, I will introduce Liam, his struggles, his world, and the moment when everything begins to change. Let's begin. Every morning, Liam woke up before sunrise. And every morning, he felt the same heavy question sitting in his chest. Why am I even doing all of this? He would stare at the ceiling for long minutes, listening to the ticking of the old clock on his bedroom wall. He was only 24, but he already felt older than he should. Work drained him. His dreams felt far away. And his motivation, what little he once had, seemed completely gone. Liam worked as a junior graphic designer in a small advertising company. He had imagined that this job would be fun, creative, and exciting. But reality was different. Most days, he was stuck correcting the same designs over and over again. He felt like a machine, not an artist. Sometimes his boss praised him, sometimes she criticized him, but none of it mattered. Liam felt like he had lost the spark inside him. At home, things weren't much better. His room was messy. His plans for personal projects sat unfinished on his desk. His sketchbook had not been opened in 3 months. Even his morning coffee didn't taste good anymore. Everything felt gray. One Monday morning, Liam stood in front of the mirror brushing his hair. He was tired, and his eyes looked empty. He whispered to his reflection, "Where did my motivation go? And how do I get it back?" He didn't expect an answer, but something inside him knew he couldn't continue like this. Later that day, after work, Liam took the long route home. He walked through the park, hoping that fresh air would improve his mood. People passed him, laughing, talking, jogging. They all seemed to have direction. He felt like the only one moving through life without a map. He sat on a bench near a quiet pond. The water was completely still, like a mirror. A few ducks swam lazily across the surface. Liam watched them, feeling strangely calm. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to simply sit and breathe. As he rested there, an old man with a brown coat sat down beside him. Liam didn't look at him at first, but after a moment, the man said lightly, "You look like someone who has forgotten something important." Liam blinked. "Sorry?" The old man smiled. His eyes were bright, almost glowing. "You look like someone who has forgotten why he started. Motivation doesn't disappear. We simply lose sight of it." Liam wasn't sure why, but something in the man's voice made him listen. "I don't know how to get it back," he admitted quietly. The man nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for that answer. "Then maybe," he said, "it's time for you to start small again." Liam frowned. "Start small?" "Yes," the man replied. "Motivation grows from small victories. Not big dreams alone. Tomorrow morning, before you do anything else, do one tiny task that matters to you. Something you choose. Then continue doing small tasks every day. You will see what happens." Liam wanted to ask more questions, but the old man stood up. "Take care of your spark," he said. "If you feed it even a little, it will grow again." And before Liam could say another word, the man walked away down the path, disappearing behind the trees. Liam sat there for a long time, thinking about those words. Start small. It sounded simple, maybe too simple. But something inside him shifted. For the first time in months, he felt a small drop of curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, the first drop of motivation. He looked down at his hands and whispered, "Tomorrow. I'll try tomorrow. This simple promise marked the beginning of a journey that would slowly change everything. The next morning, Liam woke up earlier than usual, not because he felt suddenly full of energy, but because the old man's words were still echoing in his mind. The sky outside was pale and soft, the kind of morning light that made everything look gentle. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbed his eyes, and whispered, "Start small." It felt strange to say it out loud, but he needed to hear his own voice. He needed to believe he could change something, even if it was only a tiny part of his day. He looked around his messy room and noticed his sketchbook on the desk. 3 months of dust covered the cover. It wasn't a big task to open it. It wasn't going to save his career or solve his lack of motivation. But it was something that mattered to him. He stood up, walked slowly to the desk, and touched the sketchbook with the tips of his fingers. Then he opened it. The blank page stared back at him, clean and white. Liam picked up a pencil. His hand felt stiff at first, almost nervous, as if he had forgotten how to draw. But he took a deep breath and made the first line. It was crooked, simple, and small. But it was a start. For 10 minutes, he drew without thinking, shapes, lines, shadows, nothing special, nothing beautiful. Yet when he lifted the pencil, he felt something inside him soften. He had forgotten how comforting it felt to create even the simplest sketch. He closed the sketchbook carefully and sat back. The task had taken only 10 minutes, but it felt like a quiet victory. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely empty. On his way to work, he carried the sketchbook in his bag, and it felt like he was carrying a little flame that he didn't want the wind to blow out. His steps were still heavy, his mind still tired, but he sensed a small change, a tiny shift, as if he had opened a window in a room that had been closed for too long. At the office, things looked and sounded the same as always. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Sarah, the project manager, talked loudly on the phone. His coworkers typed frantically to meet their deadlines. But for some reason, Liam felt himself slightly separated from the chaos, watching it from a calmer place. During lunch break, he walked outside and sat on a bench behind the building. Normally he scrolled on his phone, but today he simply sat and breathed the cold afternoon air. He thought about what the old man had told him, tiny tasks, tiny steps. Maybe he could try another one today. Something simple. Something that didn't require huge energy. When he returned home later that evening, he washed a pile of dishes that had been sitting in the sink for days. It wasn't a creative task, and it wasn't exciting, but when he finished, the kitchen looked cleaner, brighter. That small order brought him a sense of control. He made a cup of tea and sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the street outside. For a moment he wondered who the old man in the park had been, and why his words had affected him so much. Liam wasn't used to taking advice from strangers. And yet, he felt grateful for that unexpected meeting. It was as if the man had seen straight through him, straight through the fog of frustration that had surrounded him for months. Before going to bed, Liam set a quiet intention: tomorrow, another small step. He didn't know what it would be yet, but he wanted to keep the streak alive. Lying in the dark, he remembered how the pencil had felt in his hand that morning. How the simple act of drawing had calmed his mind. He held on to that feeling until he fell asleep. And for the first time in a long while, his sleep felt peaceful. The next day began with rain. Heavy drops tapped against the window, filling the room with a steady rhythm. Liam woke up, stretched, and thought about what his small task could be today. He opened his sketchbook again, but instead of drawing, he spent a few minutes writing a short note to himself. "You did something yesterday. Do something again today." The handwriting was messy, but the message was clear. He closed the book and felt a quiet determination. On his way to work, he stopped at a small bakery he used to love but hadn't visited in months. He bought a warm croissant and sat outside under the awning, watching the rain fall on the sidewalk. The smell of fresh pastry and coffee brought him a sense of warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. It was a tiny pleasure, but it reminded him that the world still had simple joys to offer. At the office, the day wasn't easy. He faced 2 urgent corrections, a miscommunication with a client, and a long meeting that left everyone irritated. Still, he noticed something new. Every time he felt his motivation slipping, he remembered the small steps. Instead of drowning in frustration, he took small breaks, stood up, stretched, drank water, breathed. The problems didn't disappear, but his reaction to them changed. That evening, he didn't feel as drained as usual. He felt tired, yes, but in a natural way, not the deep exhaustion that had haunted him for months. He made another cup of tea and thought about how these tiny actions had already made his life feel different. It surprised him how small the changes were, but how much lighter he felt. As he sat by the window again, watching the city lights blink softly in the distance, he realized something important. Maybe motivation isn't a wave that suddenly crashes into your life. Maybe it's something you build slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle. And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to understand how to build it. The following week moved slowly, but it moved differently than the weeks before. Liam still woke up early, still felt the weight of routine, but every morning now carried a small question: what tiny step will I take today? It wasn't a loud question. It didn't pressure him. It was quiet, gentle, almost like a soft tap on his shoulder reminding him that each day held at least one moment he could choose. And that simple thought made his mornings feel less heavy. One Wednesday, he sat at his desk at work staring at a complicated project. The client wanted endless changes, and his boss seemed more stressed than usual. A month ago, Liam would have frozen, overwhelmed by the pressure. But this time, he closed his eyes for a moment, breathed slowly, and reminded himself that he didn't need to fix the entire problem at once. Just one piece. Just one small improvement. When he opened his eyes, the chaos around him didn't disappear, but it felt quieter somehow. He focused on the first step, adjusting the color palette, and soon, he had completed one part of the task. Then another. And another. The project was far from perfect, but it was moving forward. During lunch, instead of sitting alone in the break room like he usually did, Liam went outside again. The park near his office wasn't special, just a few trees, a bench, and a narrow walking path, but it was becoming his peaceful corner. He sat down, took out his sketchbook, and made a quick drawing of a tree. The lines were simple, but the act of drawing during the workday felt rebellious in a gentle, healing way. It was like telling himself, "You're allowed to breathe. You're allowed to be more than your tasks." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Sarah, the project manager who rarely smiled at anyone, stopped by his desk. "Hey," she said softly, almost awkwardly. "I just wanted to say the updates you made look really good. Cleaner. More balanced." Liam looked up, surprised. "Oh, thank you." She nodded once and walked away. It wasn't a big moment, but it warmed something inside him. He wasn't used to positive feedback. And even though he knew compliments shouldn't be the source of his motivation, it still felt good to be seen. When he returned home that evening, he cooked himself a simple dinner instead of ordering takeout. He played soft music and ate slowly, noticing the taste, the warmth, the feeling of doing something just for himself. After dinner, he cleaned the table, wiped the counter, and smiled quietly at how strange it felt to enjoy such a small routine. The apartment looked a little more alive than before. On Friday, a coworker named Daniel invited him to join a small group for after-work drinks. Normally, Liam declined such invitations because he felt tired, disconnected, and uninterested. But this time, he hesitated. Maybe connecting with others was also a small step. Maybe motivation wasn't just about work or productivity. Maybe it was also about feeling human. So he said yes. The bar was warm and filled with low music. His coworkers talked about normal things, funny clients, weekend plans, random troubles. At first, Liam felt tense, unsure what to say. But after a while, he relaxed. He even laughed at a joke Daniel made about their boss accidentally sending an email to the wrong client. For the first time in months, he felt included, like a real part of the team instead of a shadow hiding behind a computer. On his way home, the night air was cold, but he felt somehow lighter. He looked up at the sky and noticed a few stars pushing through the clouds. He hadn't looked at the night sky in a long time. It reminded him of childhood, when dreams felt simple and close. He walked slower, trying to hold on to the feeling. Saturday morning arrived with sunlight filling his room. Liam stretched, stood up, and immediately felt the urge to do something simple but meaningful. So he spent the morning cleaning his room, organizing papers, folding clothes, throwing away old receipts. With each little action, the space felt more open, and so did his mind. He stopped halfway through to drink water and look around. The room didn't look perfect, but it no longer felt like a place that trapped him. It felt more like a place where new ideas could breathe. In the afternoon, he sat on the floor with his sketchbook and began drawing again. His lines were more confident. His hand didn't tremble like before. He drew for almost an hour, lost in the quiet rhythm of movement. And when he finished, he stared at the sketch, a simple landscape, and felt a wave of pride. Not because it was a masterpiece, but because he had done it. Because he was showing up for himself, one small step at a time. Later that evening, as he made tea and stood by the window watching the golden light fade into dusk, a thought came to him. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't shock him. It simply settled into his mind like a seed. Maybe motivation isn't about feeling excited every day. Maybe it's about taking a step forward even on ordinary days. He held that thought close, feeling it settle into him like an anchor. And for the first time, he didn't feel afraid of the next day. He felt ready for it, quietly, simply ready. Sunday morning began quietly, with a soft breeze slipping through the open window and carrying the smell of early sunlight into the room. Liam woke without an alarm, which was unusual for him. For years, every morning had felt like a battle, a struggle against exhaustion and lack of direction. But today felt different. Not dramatic, not magical, just strangely calm. He stretched slowly and sat up, noticing the gentle order in his room. The floor was clean, the desk was organized, and his sketchbook lay neatly where he had left it the night before. These small changes made the room feel less like a burden and more like a place where he could breathe freely. He spent the early part of the morning making breakfast, eggs, toast, and a cup of tea. While he cooked, he realized something unexpected. He wasn't rushing. For months, his mornings had been a blur of stress and hurry, as if the day demanded more from him than he had to give. But now, he moved slowly, calmly, letting himself enjoy each moment. After breakfast, he sat by the window and watched the street below. People walked by with their dogs, kids rode their bikes, cars passed quietly. Life looked soft from this angle, like a painting where each detail had its place. Later in the afternoon, Liam decided to return to the park where he had met the old man. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he hoped to see him again, or maybe he simply wanted to sit in the same place where something inside him had shifted. The moment he arrived, he felt a familiar peace. The trees swayed in the wind, and the pond shimmered with reflected sunlight. He sat on the same bench and waited. Not for anyone, not for answers, just waited, letting his mind settle the way water settles after being stirred. As the minutes passed, he thought about how different his life had begun to feel. Not perfect, not suddenly full of success, but lighter. He wondered if other people around him had ever felt the same, lost, unmotivated, unsure of where to go next. And he wondered why no one talked about it openly. It was strange how people could share jokes, stories, even frustrations, but not the quiet truth of feeling stuck. Liam hoped that one day he might be brave enough to share his story with someone else. The old man didn't appear, but that didn't disappoint him. Instead, Liam opened his sketchbook and drew the pond, allowing the lines to flow naturally. This time, drawing didn't feel like a task or an escape. It felt like a conversation with himself, wordless, gentle, honest. When he finished, he looked at the sketch and smiled softly. It wasn't perfect, but it carried something important, presence. He had been present in the moment, fully and calmly. On his way home, he stopped at a small cafe he had never visited before. The place smelled like coffee beans and cinnamon, and wooden shelves lined the walls. He ordered a drink and chose a seat near the window. While he sipped the warm coffee, he pulled out his phone and thought about what changes he might make in the coming weeks. Not big changes, he didn't want to overwhelm himself, but simple ones. Maybe he could walk to work once a week. Maybe he could start reading again. Maybe he could even try learning something new. As he sat there, a message came through from Daniel. "We're planning a game night next week. Want to join?" Liam stared at the screen for a moment. A few weeks ago, his answer would have been an automatic, "Sorry, I can't." But now he paused. Connecting with others had made him feel unexpectedly grounded. So he typed back, "Sure, I'd like that." He felt nervous sending it, but relieved afterward, as if he had chosen a path he had been avoiding for too long. When he arrived home, the sun was beginning to set. The apartment glowed with warm light. Liam changed into comfortable clothes, put on some music, and looked at his desk. For a moment he hesitated, then he opened his laptop and cleaned out a few old files. It wasn't exciting, but it was another small step forward. Organizing things made him feel in control, and that feeling carried a quiet strength. Later that night, as he lay in bed, he thought about all the tiny actions he had taken this week. None of them were dramatic. None of them changed his career or solved every problem in his life. And yet, something inside him was undeniably shifting. He felt more connected to himself. More aware. More alive. It occurred to him that motivation wasn't something he needed to chase. It was something he needed to create through the way he lived each day. Before closing his eyes, he whispered into the darkness, "I'm getting there." It wasn't a promise or a plan. It was simply a recognition of the truth. And with that quiet thought, he drifted into sleep, ready for whatever small step the next day would bring. Monday morning arrived with gray clouds covering the sky, and a soft drizzle tapped against Liam's window. He woke up earlier than usual, as if his body had adjusted to the rhythm of small, intentional mornings. The rain made the streets shimmer, and the reflection of the lights on the wet pavement gave the city a quiet, thoughtful beauty. Liam made himself a cup of tea and sat by the window, holding the warmth in his hands, thinking about the week ahead. The small steps he had taken, drawing, organizing, walking in the park, connecting with coworkers, had begun to build a foundation. He realized that motivation wasn't some invisible force he had to wait for. It was something he could nurture through action, choice by choice. After breakfast, he packed his bag and walked to work. He chose a longer route today, letting the rain fall on his umbrella, watching puddles form and ripple. The world looked softer and slower under the drizzle. He felt calmer, more observant. On the way, he noticed a small bookstore he had never seen before. Its window displayed neatly stacked books with faded covers and handwritten signs. Liam felt a pull inside him, an interest he hadn't acknowledged in months. He promised himself he would return later in the week. For now, the small act of noticing and planning was enough. At work, the day was busier than usual. His team faced an unexpected project with a tight deadline. Normally, Liam would have felt panic creeping in, but now he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned: small steps, tiny victories, presence. He divided the project into manageable parts and began with the first task. Each completed piece gave him a quiet sense of achievement. By mid-afternoon, he could see the work shaping up. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but moving forward. The difference wasn't in what he was doing, it was in how he approached it. During lunch, Liam went outside again, rain lightly misting the air. He sat on the same park bench he had chosen before, sketchbook in hand. This time, he drew a small cafe he passed every day on his route to work. His lines were confident and smooth, capturing the scene with simplicity and calm. A little girl ran past him, laughing, and he felt a faint warmth watching the carefree joy of someone so young. The reminder that life could carry happiness in small, fleeting moments resonated deeply. Motivation, he realized, wasn't about grand inspiration. It was about noticing these moments and letting them guide him forward. After work, he returned home and made a simple dinner, enjoying each movement as he chopped vegetables and stirred the pan. He didn't feel exhausted the way he used to after a day of work. Instead, he felt a quiet energy, a soft satisfaction in completing his tasks and taking care of himself. While drinking his tea afterward, he opened his laptop and started organizing personal files he had been avoiding for months. Each file he sorted, each note he read, reminded him that order, however small, brought clarity, which in turn fueled motivation. On Tuesday, Liam received an unexpected invitation from a former classmate, Emily. She had heard he was working on design projects and asked if he wanted to collaborate on a small side project. His first instinct was hesitation. He had spent months feeling too drained for anything beyond work and minimal personal life. But then he remembered the small step principle. Collaboration could be a tiny step forward, an experiment rather than a burden. He agreed. The thought of working on something creative with someone else brought a quiet excitement. It wasn't overwhelming. It was simply a new way to engage with his skills. That evening, he spent time planning the collaboration. He sketched ideas, made notes, and allowed himself to brainstorm freely without judgment. The process felt playful, like a game he was rediscovering. He realized that enjoyment was an important part of motivation. It wasn't about forcing himself to produce. It was about finding joy in what he did. Each small action, each little task, carried meaning because he chose it, and because he allowed himself to feel satisfaction in it. By Wednesday, Liam noticed changes in himself he hadn't expected. He felt lighter in his chest, more observant of the small details in his environment, and more responsive to opportunities rather than resistant. When someone asked for help at work, he offered it willingly. When a new design challenge arose, he approached it with curiosity instead of dread. These weren't monumental shifts, but they were real. He realized that motivation didn't have to be constant or explosive. It could exist quietly, as a steady presence in everyday life, nurtured by choices and actions rather than emotions alone. By Thursday, Liam felt a growing sense of momentum. The small steps he had taken were adding up, creating a rhythm that carried him forward without forcing him. He went for a short run in the morning, something he hadn't done in months, and felt the physical energy fuel a sense of mental clarity. At work, he finished tasks with more ease and even suggested a new approach for an ongoing project. The team responded positively, and for the first time, he felt truly part of a collective effort rather than a passive participant. That night, as he lay in bed, Liam reflected on the week. He didn't feel as tired as he used to after a long day. He didn't feel the constant heaviness in his chest. Instead, he felt a gentle sense of pride and hope. Motivation, he understood now, wasn't a singular event or a magic feeling. It was a series of small choices, repeated and nurtured over time. And as he drifted into sleep, he made a quiet promise to himself. Tomorrow, he would continue taking small steps, and he would trust the process, knowing that these steps, though tiny, were powerful. Friday arrived with bright sunlight pouring into Liam's room. He woke earlier than usual, carrying the same quiet intention that had guided him all week, to take small steps, to notice life, and to keep moving forward even in ordinary moments. He stretched slowly, feeling his muscles remember the run from the day before. It was a subtle but satisfying reminder that progress was happening, not all at once, but steadily. He made a simple breakfast, sipped his tea while looking out the window, and noticed the way the sunlight made the city streets glow, giving everything a kind of warmth that felt like encouragement. At work, Liam faced a demanding schedule. Multiple projects needed attention, and several colleagues sought his input. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, he approached the day with the strategy he had been practicing for weeks: divide tasks into small, achievable steps. He handled each email, correction, and design tweak one at a time, focusing fully on the task at hand rather than worrying about everything at once. The effect was subtle, but he noticed a calm clarity spreading through his mind. Work felt lighter, less like a burden and more like a series of challenges he could meet gradually. During lunch, Liam decided to take a detour to the small bookstore he had seen earlier in the week. The cozy smell of old paper and coffee filled his senses, and he wandered through the aisles slowly, examining the covers. His fingers lingered on books about creativity, self-improvement, and art. One book caught his eye, a small, leather-bound journal with blank pages. He purchased it without hesitation, feeling a flicker of excitement. It wasn't a solution to anything, but it represented an opportunity, a space where he could capture thoughts, sketches, reflections, and ideas, however small or imperfect. That afternoon, Liam returned to the office and applied the small-step approach to a challenging client project. The client's demands were extensive, yet he focused on tackling each element methodically. He noticed how much more effective he had become at prioritizing and managing pressure. A quiet confidence was building inside him, a sense that he could handle difficulties without being overwhelmed. For the first time in months, he felt like his skills were a tool, not a source of stress. After work, he walked home slowly, carrying his new journal. The streets were lively, with children playing, people chatting, and the smell of street food drifting from nearby stalls. Liam smiled at the ordinary beauty of the evening, realizing that noticing small details could bring unexpected joy. When he reached home, he spent an hour writing in his journal. Not planning the future, not worrying about deadlines, but simply recording thoughts, reflections, and sketches. The act of writing allowed him to process his day, acknowledge progress, and reinforce the habit of intentional, mindful action. That night, Liam called Emily to discuss their collaboration. They shared ideas, laughed over past missteps, and brainstormed creative approaches. The conversation reminded Liam that motivation was not a solitary experience. It could be shared, nurtured, and amplified through connection. Working with someone who understood the creative process, who encouraged experimentation, and who shared excitement for small achievements added a new layer to his developing routine. Saturday morning came with a crisp breeze. Liam decided to combine his morning run with a small act of gratitude. As he jogged through the park, he consciously noticed the world around him, the color of leaves, the sound of birds, the warmth of sunlight on his skin. Each observation became a small anchor, reminding him that life offered moments of motivation if he paid attention. By the time he returned home, he felt both physically energized and mentally clear, ready to dedicate time to creative work. He spent the afternoon in the park sketching scenes he noticed during his run. Unlike earlier, he allowed himself to experiment freely, without judgment or pressure. Each line and shape was a small victory, a celebration of being present. He realized that these tiny victories, completing sketches, cleaning spaces, making small choices, were accumulating. Motivation wasn't a distant goal. It was something he was building every day, brick by brick, choice by choice. Sunday was quiet. Liam used the day to rest and reflect. He organized his workspace, revisited sketches from the past week, and wrote down lessons learned in his journal. He recognized that motivation didn't always feel dramatic. It was often subtle, quiet, and cumulative. By focusing on small, meaningful steps, he could create a stable foundation for action and growth. And for the first time in a long while, Liam felt steady, confident, and ready for the challenges of the week ahead, knowing that each small step mattered. Monday morning arrived, and Liam woke to a gentle sunlight filtering through his curtains. The city outside buzzed quietly, but inside his apartment, a calm focus had settled over him. He stretched, sipped his tea, and opened his journal, feeling a quiet anticipation for the day. The practice of small steps had become a natural rhythm. He no longer forced motivation, he cultivated it. Each tiny action, drawing, writing, walking, organizing, was a seed that slowly grew into a steady energy. At work, the day started with a new challenge. A client requested an entirely redesigned concept with a very tight deadline. In the past, Liam would have panicked, letting stress cloud his judgment. Today, he took a deep breath, broke the project into manageable pieces, and started with the first one. With each completed step, he felt a sense of accomplishment, small but reinforcing. The pile of tasks no longer felt like a mountain. Instead, it was a series of small hills, each climb giving him strength for the next. During lunch, Liam decided to revisit the park bench by the pond. The trees were turning golden in early autumn, and the reflection of the leaves in the water was mesmerizing. He opened his sketchbook and began drawing the scene, letting his pencil flow without any pressure for perfection. A few passers-by glanced at his work with curiosity, and one child smiled and waved at him. The interaction was small, almost insignificant, yet it left him with a warmth he hadn't felt in months. Motivation, he realized, wasn't just internal, it could also be fueled by simple connections with the world around him. After work, Liam met Emily at a quiet cafe to continue their creative collaboration. They brainstormed ideas for a small design project, discussing colors, shapes, and storyboards. The process was playful and energizing. Liam noticed that the act of creating alongside someone else brought a new dimension to his motivation. It wasn't about pressure or obligation, it was about shared curiosity, exploration, and small, incremental achievements. Each sketch, note, or idea contributed to a sense of progress, and progress brought confidence. At home that evening, Liam prepared a simple dinner and reflected on the day. He noticed a subtle shift. He no longer measured his worth by productivity alone, nor did he chase grand achievements to feel alive. Instead, he valued the accumulation of small victories, each completed sketch, each organized task, each intentional moment of presence. Motivation, he realized, was not a sudden surge but a cultivated habit, sustained by repeated actions and mindful choices. Tuesday brought an unexpected opportunity. A colleague asked if Liam could help with a workshop for junior designers. Initially, he hesitated, unsure if he had the energy or authority. But then he remembered the principle he had been following: take small steps. He could contribute in small, manageable ways. The workshop was scheduled for later in the week, and he spent the afternoon preparing a few simple exercises, each focused on helping participants explore creativity in small increments. Preparing the materials didn't overwhelm him. Instead, it brought a quiet excitement. On Wednesday, the workshop took place. Liam guided the participants through exercises, encouraging them to focus on one small task at a time. As he observed their progress, he felt an unexpected joy. Teaching others reinforced his own understanding of motivation. He realized that the process of breaking large tasks into manageable pieces was universal. He also noticed how his own confidence had grown. He was no longer afraid to contribute, to take initiative, or to share insights. Motivation was contagious, and sharing it amplified its power. Thursday was quieter. Liam spent time sketching at the park again, experimenting with perspective and shadow. He also returned to his journal, reflecting on lessons learned and recording small victories. He noted a pattern: days felt richer, not because of monumental events, but because of the accumulation of small, meaningful actions. He felt lighter, more energized, and surprisingly patient with himself. By Friday, Liam's mindset had shifted in subtle yet profound ways. Work challenges still existed, social obligations still required attention, and life remained unpredictable. Yet, he approached each day with a steady focus, taking one small action at a time. Motivation was no longer a distant, unpredictable wave. It was a gentle current he could navigate, nurtured by mindful attention and consistent small steps. That night, as he lay in bed, he reflected on the week. He thought about the sketches, the walks, the creative collaboration, the small victories, and the workshop. Each one was a thread, weaving together a fabric of confidence, presence, and purpose. He realized that staying motivated every day wasn't about grand gestures or extraordinary inspiration. It was about choosing, intentionally, to take action, even tiny action, consistently. And with that realization, he drifted into a calm, deep sleep, ready to continue building his momentum in the week ahead. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a gentle warmth in the air. Liam woke up feeling the steady rhythm of his new routine already embedded in him. He stretched, poured a cup of tea, and opened his journal. The pages were beginning to fill with sketches, notes, reflections, and reminders of small victories. The habit of recording his thoughts had become a quiet ritual, one that reminded him that motivation was built gradually, nurtured by consistent action rather than sudden inspiration. He decided to start the day with a walk in the park. The autumn leaves crunched beneath his feet as he strolled along the familiar paths. Birds chirped in the trees, and a soft breeze carried the scent of damp earth. Liam found himself observing the little details he had previously ignored, the way sunlight danced through branches, the rhythm of leaves falling onto the path, the casual laughter of children playing nearby. Each observation was a small gift, a reminder that life's energy could be found in simple, ordinary moments. He took out his sketchbook and captured the scene loosely, without striving for perfection. The act itself, he realized, was motivation in motion. Later that afternoon, Liam met Emily again to continue their collaborative project. They had settled into a comfortable rhythm, exchanging ideas freely, experimenting with design elements, and giving constructive feedback. The partnership had become a source of inspiration for Liam, reminding him that motivation often flourishes in connection with others. Each shared idea, each small breakthrough, reinforced the importance of action over waiting for the perfect moment or the ideal feeling. By the time they finished, he felt energized, excited to see how their project would grow, and grateful for the experience. Returning home, Liam spent time organizing his workspace. He cleared away clutter, arranged his materials neatly, and wiped down surfaces. While this task seemed mundane, he felt satisfaction in creating an environment that supported focus and creativity. He realized that external order often reflected internal clarity. Completing small, tangible actions, even those unrelated to work or creativity, gave him a sense of control and accomplishment, reinforcing the habit of taking deliberate steps every day. In the evening, he returned to his sketchbook and experimented with new techniques, allowing himself to explore without judgment. His lines were more confident, his shading more intuitive. Each page told a story of persistence and growth. Motivation, he realized, was cumulative. It was not dependent on mood or external recognition, but on the repeated practice of showing up, even when the desire to act was faint. The process of creating, reflecting, and observing had become a cycle that reinforced itself quietly but powerfully. On Sunday, Liam decided to combine his morning routine with a brief meditation. Sitting on the floor, he closed his eyes and focused on his breath, observing thoughts without judgment. The practice helped him connect with a calm, steady energy that he could carry into the day. Afterwards, he made breakfast, wrote a few lines in his journal, and planned small goals for the coming week. Each goal was simple, achievable, and intentional. The act of planning was no longer overwhelming, it was motivating in itself. Later that day, he revisited the bookstore he had discovered weeks ago. He wandered through the aisles, letting curiosity guide him. A few books caught his eye, and he purchased one on creativity and daily practice. The book was small, practical, and encouraging, and he felt a thrill at the idea of learning something new. Motivation, he reflected, was often sparked by curiosity and the willingness to engage, even in small ways. By evening, Liam prepared a simple dinner and sat by the window, reflecting on the past week. He noted that he no longer relied on bursts of energy or dramatic inspiration to act. Instead, he had developed a sustainable approach, taking small, meaningful actions consistently, observing the world attentively, connecting with others, and nurturing curiosity. Motivation, he realized, was a living practice, an accumulation of small, deliberate choices that shaped the quality of each day. As he lay in bed that night, he felt gratitude for the ordinary moments, the small victories, and the steady rhythm he had cultivated. He understood now that staying motivated every day was not about waiting for extraordinary feelings, but about creating conditions that allowed motivation to emerge naturally. With a quiet smile, he closed his eyes, feeling ready to face the coming week with presence, action, and intention. Monday morning arrived with a cool breeze and the distant hum of the city waking up. Liam opened his eyes and felt a quiet sense of anticipation, not anxiety, not pressure, just a readiness to engage with the day. Over the past weeks, he had learned that motivation was less about feeling inspired in the moment, and more about cultivating a consistent practice. Each small step, each mindful choice, had begun to form a steady rhythm that carried him forward. He brewed a cup of tea, opened his journal, and wrote down a short reflection from the weekend. Small actions accumulate. Progress is built on consistency. At work, The day was packed with meetings, revisions, and urgent tasks. But Liam approached everything differently than before. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, he broke down each project into smaller, manageable components. One task at a time, one decision at a time. He noticed how the anxiety that used to weigh on him had diminished. There was a sense of clarity now, a calm focus that made even complicated challenges feel approachable. When he completed a particularly difficult task, he felt a subtle surge of pride, not because it was extraordinary, but because he had followed through and taken action. During lunch, Liam revisited his habit of walking to the park. The crisp air was invigorating, and he allowed himself to observe the world without distraction. Children played on swings, dogs chased fallen leaves, and the sun filtered softly through the trees. Sitting on the familiar bench, he sketched the scene quickly, focusing more on the act of observing and capturing the moment than on technical perfection. He realized that motivation was strengthened by these small acts of presence, paying attention, noticing beauty, creating something tangible, even in simple ways. Later in the afternoon, Emily and he exchanged messages about their project. They had established a comfortable rhythm, exchanging ideas, giving feedback, and supporting each other's progress. The collaboration reminded Liam that motivation could flourish when shared. Working alongside someone who encouraged experimentation and appreciated small steps created a sense of accountability and inspiration. By evening, they had produced a few solid ideas for their project, and Liam felt energized, not drained. It was proof that motivation was not only internal but also relational. It could be nurtured through connection and shared effort. When he returned home, Liam spent time organizing his apartment. He cleaned surfaces, sorted papers, and made space for his creative work. The act of tidying was meditative, reinforcing the idea that external order helped cultivate internal clarity. Afterward, he revisited his sketches, adding details and shading. Each stroke of the pencil felt purposeful, a quiet acknowledgement of progress, practice, and dedication. Motivation, he reflected, was reinforced through these small, deliberate actions repeated day after day. On Tuesday, Liam received a surprising invitation from a colleague to attend a networking event for creative professionals. Previously, he might have dismissed the opportunity as intimidating or exhausting. But now he paused, considering the small steps he could take. Attending wouldn't require him to be overly outgoing or performative. It was enough to show up, observe, and engage in brief conversations. Viewing the event as a manageable step rather than a daunting obligation shifted his perspective, and he agreed to attend. Motivation, he realized, was about framing challenges in achievable terms and finding ways to engage without self-imposed pressure. Wednesday morning, he started with a short run, appreciating the rhythm of his body and the clarity it brought to his mind. Physical movement had become another form of small, consistent action that supported motivation. Later, at work, he tackled the project with confidence, noticing how far he had come in managing both tasks and emotions. By approaching challenges incrementally, he could sustain his energy and maintain a steady pace rather than burning out. Each completed step reinforced his sense of competence and progress. Thursday brought reflection. Liam spent a few hours journaling, capturing insights, and summarizing lessons from the past weeks. He noticed patterns. Small actions built momentum, consistency strengthened focus, presence nurtured awareness, and connection amplified engagement. Motivation was no longer a fleeting emotion but a cultivated practice. Writing these reflections solidified the lessons in his mind, reinforcing habits, and creating a roadmap for continued growth. That night, as he prepared for bed, Liam felt gratitude for the week's experiences. The small, intentional steps he had taken, sketching, walking, connecting, organizing, exercising, were accumulating into meaningful change. Motivation, he realized, was not a distant goal to chase, but a daily choice, a commitment to act intentionally. With a calm heart and clear mind, he lay down, ready to embrace the coming week, trusting that even ordinary days could be filled with purpose when approached with awareness and consistency. Sunday morning arrived quietly, with golden sunlight spilling into Liam's room. As he opened his eyes, he reflected on the journey of the past weeks. What had once felt impossible, maintaining motivation, feeling engaged, moving through daily tasks with energy, was no longer a struggle. Instead, he experienced a calm, steady rhythm, built from small, deliberate steps repeated consistently over time. Motivation had become a practice, not a fleeting emotion. Each day carried an opportunity to act, to observe, to create, and to connect. He started his morning ritual: tea, journal, and a few minutes of stretching. Looking out the window, he noticed the subtle beauty of everyday life: neighbors walking dogs, birds hopping along the rooftops, leaves turning amber in the soft sunlight. He realized that part of staying motivated was cultivating awareness of the world around him. Observing these small details grounded him, reminding him that life was composed of ordinary moments that carried extraordinary potential if noticed and valued. After breakfast, Liam took a long walk in the park. He reflected on the routines and habits he had developed: morning reflections, journaling, sketching, short runs, connecting with others, and breaking tasks into small, manageable steps. Each practice contributed to a foundation of motivation that was sustainable and gentle. He no longer chased inspiration or waited for the perfect moment. Instead, he created conditions in which motivation could flourish naturally, nurtured by consistent attention and small, meaningful actions. Later in the afternoon, he revisited his sketchbook and began drawing scenes from the past week: the park, the bookstore, the cafe where he collaborated with Emily, and moments from his walks. He observed how much his work had evolved, not in terms of technical perfection, but in confidence, presence, and the ability to capture life's subtleties. Every completed sketch reinforced the lesson he had been learning: motivation grows through action, reflection, and practice. Even small efforts accumulate into significant, lasting change. In the evening, Liam spent time connecting with others. He called a friend he hadn't spoken to in months and shared stories about recent experiences and small victories. The conversation reminded him that motivation wasn't solely internal. Sharing progress, learning from others, and engaging in meaningful exchanges amplified the energy within him. Motivation thrived in connection, as well as in solitude. Both were essential for a balanced, sustained sense of purpose. As night fell, Liam reflected on the cumulative power of small steps. He remembered the overwhelming days when work, life, and personal challenges felt like insurmountable obstacles. Back then, motivation seemed elusive, dependent on luck or sudden bursts of energy. But now, he understood that motivation is cultivated through deliberate, repeated actions, each small choice adding to a foundation of confidence and progress. Even when feelings of doubt or fatigue appeared, the practice itself created resilience and momentum. He thought about the lessons he had learned: break large tasks into small steps, take consistent action daily, observe the world and find beauty in ordinary moments, connect with others, and nurture curiosity and creativity. Motivation was not about grand achievements or dramatic inspiration. It was about showing up, choosing action, and allowing progress to build incrementally. He realized that he had become the person he had wished to be weeks ago, not because life had changed dramatically, but because he had cultivated habits and awareness that transformed his experience of each day. Before going to sleep, Liam wrote a final note in his journal. Motivation is a practice. Every small step matters. Every action, no matter how minor, contributes to growth. Trust the process. Keep moving forward. With a calm heart and a deep sense of purpose, he lay down, feeling grounded, inspired, and ready for the weeks to come. Motivation was no longer something to chase. It was something he lived every day through intentional, mindful action. And with that, Liam closed his eyes, knowing that the journey of motivation was continuous, but manageable, joyful in its small victories, and infinitely powerful when approached with consistency and awareness. The ordinary days had become extraordinary, not through dramatic events, but through the steady accumulation of choice, presence, and action, a life transformed by the simple, deliberate cultivation of motivation.